just me.
Over Terrafly runway heading runway 5. Clear for takeoff.
From Psychic Sundays to ET Contact and everything in between, this is Spaced Out Sunday's Cosmic Passport with host Elizabeth Anglin.
Check it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Coming great, so guys, smoke now.
You can connect with Elizabeth on Skype at 505-908-9558 and Spirit for Peace. Follow Liz on Twitter at Elizabeth Anglin and hashtag SpacedOutRadio. And you can connect with us on the web at spacedoutradio.com.
I feel the need for speed. You feel it over and over again. We take you higher and higher and higher. You feel it over and over again.
Chillers, rule now. Smoke off now.
This is the love we live again.
Chillers, ready, Lord.
Don't look much like Los Angeles to me. I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
Now taking you on a spiritual journey from the desert of New Mexico this Sunday night, here's Spaced Out Sunday's Cosmic Passport with Elizabeth Anglin.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio's Cosmic Passport. I am your host, Elizabeth Anglin, coming to you from the Spaced Out Radio Cosmic Cruise Mobile. We are coming to you live from the stormy, windy, wild, and actually quite nice today, desert Southwest. We are in such a better shape than many people along the coastlines of the southern U.S., and we wish them well and send our prayers to them. We are here from New Mexico, as we are every Sunday here on spacedoutradio.com. And for all of you listening in from around North America and the world, I hope you are safe and well and in a safe place. I especially want to welcome everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key in Noonan, Georgia. Everyone at spacedoutradio.com on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, Renegade Talk Radio, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and on KTLK, The Fringe. We also want to thank our guitar god, Ron BUMBLEFOOT, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. He creates the music that makes Spaced Out Radio Weekend Rock, the official spacedoutradio.com music. We love him for it. Thank you, Ron. Thank you. Thank you. Also, if you are not informed yet of where you can check us out, well, let me inform you. You can go to Twitter and find us at Spaced Out Radio. You can go to Facebook and find me at Cosmic Passport with Elizabeth Anglin. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and get replays of all of our shows there. Tune us in on TuneIn, download our shows from iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and on Stitcher. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. If you go to patreon.com, We have some cool offers for you, our listeners there as well. Make sure you check those out. And if you want to take part in the show, you'll have to sign into one of our chat rooms on Spreaker or on the chat room on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club, which is where I will be tonight because Spreaker's not letting me in. I don't know. I offended it somehow. I don't know what happened. So I'll be at the SOR Space Travelers Club. I'll have Eric looking in on Spreaker for us. If you head to our website, spaced-out-radio.com, for just $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. We offer some pretty decent stuff for pretty decent people there. You are our valued listener, and it's our opportunity to give back to you. Let us do it. Let's give you something, a t-shirt, and some other good stuff. Please check out our news section, The Encounter, that deals with everything paranormal, courtesy of our editors, Eric Marcum and Everett Thiemer. And you can check out Dave Scott's latest blog there as well. I'm sure Dave is going to have something to blog about this week. I'm not sure if he wants to come on the air, but I've seen a picture from his latest ghost hunt that is just pretty intense. It's pretty intense. So he's had his own experience this weekend, and if you've had an experience you can't explain, you can fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our researchers are ready to help you find out what's going on with your experience, and they are willing to keep it on the down low because they're experiencers too, and they know how important that is. Well, without further ado, we're going to get going with, I think it's a timely show. Hey, Eric, are you around?
Yes, I am.
And this is Eric Marcum. If for those of you who don't know the preacher, how are you doing tonight, Eric?
Doing fine. How about you?
I'm alive, I'm awake, and that's good, and I'm drinking lots of coffee.
I'm
Yeah.
getting all jazzed up about the things I have to do to get ready for the trip next week.
Yeah.
And reading over my presentation and seeing horrible grammatic errors.
Hey, I figure if you write like you talk, it's all okay. So, if you talk badly or poorly, and you write the same way, nobody will notice because it'll just
Actually,
sound like you.
Well, it's not so much grammar, but I can see where I saw a concept. I thought, oh, that would go better here. And then I pasted it. Then I went and wrote something else. And, anyway, I'm doing the final edit tonight. So I'll find all that stuff.
Oh, well, that's good. You're prepared. I remember when I used to have to edit talks for grad students, and it would be 3 days before. So you're doing well. You're a whole week and a few days out. So almost 2 weeks. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way I used to do term papers. I would mull what I wanted to write over my head for weeks. Then I would sit down the night before and write it out. This time I said, no, I'm going to get a head start on it this time.
Well, good. Now, what are you talking about? So that people who haven't signed up to go to the Paracon Forest Moon Paranormal Conference in Concrete can, get tempted. What's your subject?
I am going to talk about how we can use science to validate it's science and the paranormal. How to use the scientific method and use science to investigate the paranormal. And I'm not talking about running around with a K2 meter and, playing Pokemon Ghost, as Dave would call it. I'm talking about, seriously gathering data and trying to compile a database. I'm also going to talk about and do a demonstration on evidence collection. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do, basically, I'm probably going to take a chicken, a store-bought something, and show how to get tissue samples and how to preserve them, what to look for. And then I'm going to do a thing about behavior and ethics toward the end. So it's going to be science and the paranormal, evidence collection, and behavior and ethics. Code of conduct and ethics, as Cooper would want me to put it, probably.
Right.
So I'm going to be up on my soapbox.
Well, good. That's good. Well, it's interesting to me because tonight we are doing predictions and prophecy. And I have actually had some experience with wanting to write a paper about remote viewing predictions for the year ahead. back in 2008, I got asked by a local alternative newspaper, the Albuquerque Alibi, to remote view things around the world that were going to happen in the year 2008. And it was the target was everything in the world. What are things that we're going to see in headlines? So I did, and I didn't realize that it was a setup for a skeptic to write an article on January 1st about how you can't predict things that are going to happen ahead. And the problem was, I predicted Ivan, I predicted the floods in Iowa, I predicted that there were massive locust swarms that were happening, not in the U.S., because locusts don't swarm in the U.S., but in China and Kazakhstan and Australia. It was one of those years that was just booming with locust swarms. And I got trashed by this skeptic who wrote his rebuttal about proving through science, which he had no science whatsoever. The only thing he had was some rhetoric, because when I talked about the locust swarms, everything else had happened. And when I talked about the locust swarms, I hadn't made sure to say where they were happening. I hadn't said not in the U.S. I had just said, oh, swarms of locusts. There'll be a lot of them. And there were so many that the Chinese went out a month before the Olympics, and they had people killing them and cleaning them up and removing them so that they could do the Olympics without swarms of locusts. There were so many that they had pictures from Australia. There were so many in Kazakhstan. It was incredible. So this guy didn't even look that up. He took the one thing that didn't happen, which was there were no swarms of locusts in the U.S., which there haven't been since Rocky Mountain locust in 1904 or something like that. And there very rarely are. Yeah. So, and because the line before I had said there will be floods in the Midwest, especially Iowa, look for pictures of pigs in flood, and my clients had started sending me pictures from the news of the pigs in flood in Iowa, and so he said, and then I went into, this will be a good year for swarms of locusts, and I didn't say where. So I got dinged on that. I got hate mail. But I wasn't, if I were going to do a rebuttal, I really would have to do it in a scientific way based on statistics. And when you think about how can you prove whether something actually is a prediction versus, anybody can say that, and of course that's going to happen. There has to be a way of understanding what's significant, and how do you show that something has a high level of significance as a prediction. And I thought about this, and then I said, I don't have enough information in writing papers and showing statistical significance to go back over my remote viewing and say, well, because you'd have to do how many years before these things had happened or hadn't happened, and were they expected, and then you'd have to do several years after. That was my thought. And of course I never wrote this paper, but I sure wanted to, because it really, his thing went all over the world, and I had people yelling at me from, Guam. Hey!
Internationally hated psychic.
Internationally hated psychic, with people from Singapore and Guam and, all over the place saying, you're stupid. And then I'm saying there were 2 swarms of locusts, and that was not what the target was. The target was not just the U.S., so... Anyway.
Now, is that prophecy so much, or... I don't know. I'm a little unclear on what's prophecy and what it, because when you say prophecy to me, I think, somebody being struck by a bolt of lightning from God, and then they start rolling all this stuff out. Whereas where you do a remote viewing, is that more just fast forwarding the timeline? Or, I don't know. I'm kind of new to that side of things.
Well, that's the other thing is when we get into definitions of if I in December of 2007, which is, I think I did this on December 12th, 2007, and looking at headlines from around the world for world events in 2008, you know, a remote viewing timeline of a year is not out of the realm of possibility for anyone. In fact, I do year-ahead readings every January for people, and the probability field will show the major things that have the most probability of happening. And with the world, there's even more energy, and there are reasons for there to be more energy. You know, locusts, a swarm of locusts is actually a sign of a severe drought breaking with lots of rain. And when you have climate change, which we're going to talk about, whether or not people think it's real or not, and you have a severe drought for many years and it breaks with a lot of rain, because that's what happens in climate change. You either get feast or famine. You either get a lot of snow, a lot of rain, and a lot of heat and a lot of dry. Those conditions are perfect for locust swarms. So I could have been a scientist who was saying, you know what, it's getting to be time for this 10-year drought to break or this 8-year drought to break, and I predict locusts. Now, what's interesting with remote viewing is you don't think about anything. You just look at the probability field, and you see all these locusts swarming all around, and people going, ah! And, you know, and, oh, there's that one. And so it's not, you don't have to be a systems analyst, a world systems analyst, an ecological analyst, a meteorological analyst to predict there will be locusts, because what you're seeing is that they are out there in the probability field for the year doing their thing. Now, what was I saying? Is that prophecy? No, I think it's probability field reading, because the prophets that the church has, you know, canonized in terms of saints, the Catholic Church in particular, they're giving prophecies about the end of times, the end of days, things that are hundreds if not thousands of years in the future from the time that they were living in. And even Nostradamus, it was hundreds of years after his time, many of the things that he prophesied. So, but, you know, even with remote viewing, you can look 100 years in the future and say, I want to know what's happening in Denver on April 4th. I want to know what's happening in Chicago on October 3rd. And you will come up with the most significant, the thing that has the highest amount of energy as of today on that date. So I guess you could use it for that. But as you're saying, it's a probability field. So what you can look 100 years in the future and see the probability field, but that's not the same as saying it's carved in stone. Right. Because it's a probability, and you've always got, in statistical analysis, you've got the outlier. You know, if you take a bell-shaped curve, you've got at the very top is the average or the mean, and then you have tails that go in each direction, like highly improbable, you know, 1 in a trillion type of chances. Right. If one of those actually hits, that changes the whole outlook of what you saw in your 100-year scan. Right. Well, and that's another way, the way you're talking about statistics. A friend of mine said what you want to do is find out the probability that you could have predicted altogether the floods I predicted heavy snows in Colorado, which were true, and then I predicted the floods in the Midwest, which were based on heavy snows in Colorado, in the mountains, which was true. I predicted Ivan at the time that Ivan happened. I didn't know it was called Ivan, but I knew it was where it went and what time it happened, and the locust. And those were the main things that were really... And I predicted unrest over Tibet and unrest in Taiwan, which had been happening the year before. So you could have said, well, you know, it's not resolved yet. So yes, you can expect that people would be in the streets in Taiwan. But the year after that, it wasn't happening anymore. But to be able to hit, you know, 4 or 5 things in a row, to do the statistics on how probable would that be, is it? Yeah, you'd have to expand. You'd have to have set values that you could. What was that thing we did? Expand the polynomial, which
would give you every power. You'd have to figure out how to take your data and use it to expand the polynomial, which is something we did in genetics, and that would give you the, what chance in 100 this would happen. But trying to figure out how to put the data into the polynomial would probably be the trick.
Right. Yeah.
But it'd be fun to try.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, and you'd also have to not try to be too. I mean, the unfortunate thing is, how do you know if you're right about what you put in? And so it would be quite a number. But I suppose somebody who is much more comfortable with statistics than I am might be able to do that and just be like, oh yeah, we can do that. That's within the right order of magnitude of a number. Let's do that.
That would probably be the best way to go, because even if you try to be detached subconsciously, you can't eliminate bias if you do the statistical analysis yourself. Which, that's
right.
One of the things that statistics is supposed to do is to eliminate bias, but it's fine in fine in print, but in practice, it's still, there's ways that, the old saying, lies, damn lies, and statistics is there for a reason. But there's statisticians that's their bread and butter, man. They just groove on that. Maybe we need to find somebody in that little subset of science and see if we can get them interested in that.
Right. Well, and that would be wonderful. And the weird thing is that I have some people that I know who do risk-informed operational decision management, which is predictive algorithms used for human factors in power plants, nuclear power plants. So I worked with George Apostolakis for a few years in doing training programs for nuclear power plant operators that would apply statistics to, if you set it up and you have these many people on staff and these shift changes and you're doing this, you can run an algorithm that will predict what your likelihood of having an accident, whether small or severe, would be, and how your response to that accident might create another reaction and another accident down the line afterwards. So
that almost sounds like Isaac Asimov and his Harry Seldon character that predicted the future through statistics. That's some real foundation stuff there.
Yeah, and I haven't read Foundation since I was in high school, but it was pretty amazing. Like, you could read. I remember reading Foundation and then rereading it and going, oh. So, but you could, I suppose you could, if you wanted to apply that sort of extension of probability to everything, you would get a risk factor for everything that you ever do. But I'll tell you what, you wouldn't have a very happy life. What I'm saying. Yeah.
Right. That would be, I don't know. I think, have you ever wondered if maybe we don't have, not everybody can do the remote view and look ahead, because maybe if we could, it would just take, maybe we take on this mortal lifetime to kind of break up the boredom of eternity. And if you look ahead too much, it's sort of like, well, why bother? Like playing a video game on cheats.
Well, and the other thing is, are you really living in, and there is that sort of quantum idea of every time you look at something, do you change it? Like you were saying when you were reading tarot cards and you did them for prediction, are you changing the outcome because the cards came out a certain way? And, there's isn't that a quantum thing that when you look at a system, you produce a change in the system because you looked at it?
I gotta wonder, the guy that really made me stop, I had two guys that they were on the air wing I read them, I did their readings both. One didn't know and of course I was young and arrogant enough to think that, what I was doing, I don't know, my attitude when I was reading was probably not correct. But it was a choice between two women. And another guy is like, you're going to mess up and, you're going to have a trial by fire, but you're going to come through it better, but it's going to cost. And both of these things happened, and it just sort of like he chose, one girl over the other, and it kind of creeped me out because at first it was like, yeah, I read it right, and then but a couple days later I was like, oh, or did they do, like you said, did I set up a self-fulfilling prophecy? Did I change the future by observing it? And I kind of got away from reading after that, at least for, like reading like that, and I had to redo my attitude about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't worry about that so much because I figure if it's out there in the probability field, and it comes up, that you're probably looking at it somewhere along its timeline anyway. And I do like to tell people, you don't have to do this. This is where things stand. If you're, this was what it looks like your decisions will lead you to, but you can always make a different decision. So I do like to do a lot of if-thens, and the person can say, well, what if I decided to do this instead? And then, read that, even though it's not the timeline that's happening right now. Can always read the alternative timeline. And then when I do direct readings, if I see somebody with getting married to a certain person and what they look like and what they do for a job, and Spirit is actually showing that to me, because a lot of times they'll just go, shh, don't tell them. I'll tell them what I see because it's being shown to me. Like I clairvoyantly see this. It means that somebody in Spirit has allowed this information to go forward. Like sometimes people need more reassurance versus less, because if they're working out of a state of anxiety that they're, going to be alone forever, then, they're going to sabotage themselves in some other way. So, I tend to put it out there that I only want Spirit to let me tell people things that are for their highest good, and then I don't worry about it. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what I wasn't really, like I said, this was, God, almost 40 years ago. But when I learned, my mentor didn't go into things like that. About the higher good. Putting a filter in place first. And I think if he had, I would have. I'd have kept reading, because then I would have had, like, your confidence that what you're getting is for that person's higher good. So go ahead and give them that information. I was never given that kind of advice. Right.
So,
and sometimes, there are people in the world like Dave who don't get information that they want because it wouldn't be for their highest good, or they're learning a lesson, or they have to come to an aha moment. Sorry, Dave. And I've been in readings where I've had guides just turn away at questions, or they'll just say shh, and I myself have wanted the information, or been so curious that I've kind of gone around them, and then I have them like coming after me with these little ugly sticks going, stop it! You weren't supposed to see that. Don't. But that, I'm a human being, and I have an ego, and I have curiosity, and it's like sometimes if I get curious as a reader, I can finagle my way around the filter, because it's all about intention. So you have to be aware of your own foibles. My curiosity can, kill about 1,000 cats when it really comes down to it. So, but I'm aware of that. And if I have, I can see guides running after me with ugly sticks going, then I sort of pull my punches after that. But I've seen. So it's like, it's it's probably from being the youngest and being kept out for so long, with older siblings. That's why it's a foible of mine. So I won't claim that I'm always perfect and that my filter is always perfect, because if I get really curious, watch out. All right. So speaking of this, there are things that the Catholic Church has said, and it's this is something that it's on unitypublishing.com, and it's about Giorgio, who is a stigmata that I met in 1996. It's at the end of it, and it's "Let us be more careful and test the spirits, private revelations about apparitions and visions" by Joseph Saraceno. And he's pulling out some biblical, things about prophecy that are good to think about. I think it's always good to think about the Bible as a guidepost. So St. John of the Cross, he writes in one of his things, perhaps the Church's greatest mystic warned St. John of the Cross in 1542 and 1591. And this is a mystic, so this is a seer. The desire for private revelation deprives faith of its purity, develops a dangerous curiosity that becomes a source of illusions, fills the mind with vain fancies, and often proves the want of humility and the submission to our Lord, who, through his public revelation, has given all that is needed for salvation. We must suspect these apparitions that lack dignity or proper reserve, and above all, those that are ridiculous. The last characteristic is a mark of a human or diabolical machination, so it's human ego or diabolical ego. Stay away from visions, apparitions, and miracles as much as you can. Be careful of visions, even when they are authentic. So, for those of us who are psychic and it's in our calling, I've prayed about what my calling is since I was 14 years old. I still, will have to say sometimes what is the simplest thing, and, what can you apply? Well, you can apply love to fixing this versus machinations or trying to manipulate it through knowing things that other people don't know. And what's interesting about just what St. John of the Cross says, there's a woman, Mace, Caroline Mace, who is a seer, and she's in the New Age, but she will absolutely call people on the carpet for using readings to be controlling. And she would call people out for wanting to have readings or wanting to have somebody look at the field in order to control events versus just be prepared for them or to understand them or to gain wisdom. Which, you can look at this, stay away from. You can also be very careful of visions. This is what he says, be careful of visions even when they are authentic. Why do you want to see it? Why do you need to see it? Now, when we're looking at science, everybody wants a predictive model for when a hurricane's going to hit and where it's going to hit and how strong is it going to be and how many things is it, what the flooding is going to be and what the wave action is going to be. And, do you think such a thing here applies when it's science? Eric?
Well, it's all, when we talk about any kind of predictive model, it all comes back to your basic statistics. They just say, okay, when these circumstances, it's sort of like building an algorithm or a logic tree. It's like, okay, when the temperature gets here, this does this, and it follows a chain, and then the predictive model is basically just a set of statistics. I wish my Uncle Paul was still alive, because he tried to explain. He was a weatherman in the Navy, and he tried to explain how that stuff worked, because he was part of the hurricane trackers in the Navy. Wow. So I had that to brag about in fourth grade. Yeah, my uncle flies airplanes through. It's like, wow. But anyway, it's a matter of, I honestly think you can probably compile enough numbers together on any phenomenon and come up with a probability or just call it a probability field or the odds, like if we're gambling, just the odds on something happening. I think it's predictive.
Well, and what's interesting is if you're remote viewing, there could be a way of doing a double test. Like you could do a probability of the odds on that remote viewing prediction happening. And
that's very much like Russell Targ when the Silvers, they couldn't look ahead and get a number. Right. But they could see a rise or a fall, and Russell Targ and his group remote viewed silver futures and made a pretty decent chunk of change guessing what by knowing up or down on silver futures.
Yeah, I can do okay at the roulette when it's red or green. If I only stick to the red or green, I'm good. But when I start going into the actual numbers, it's like you just forget it.
Yeah.
It's like, never mind. It's not happening. Okay, so we have questions in the SOR chat room. And Eric, if you want to look and see if there are any in Spreaker. So Claudia, and I'm sorry if somebody has asked a question before, my screen's not showing it, and I will scroll back up. Claudia Way asks in the SOR Space Travelers chat room, when you remote view, do you see a TV screen picture in your mind, and is it very clear? For me, I wish it were TV screen and like a big 48, 58, inch wide TV screen. For me, it's more like looking through a tube. When I'm far away from it, it's a tube. But if I really get into it, I bilocate to the area, and then I can sort of turn myself around and get a 360-degree view, or say, "Ooh, that looks interesting over there. Let me reposition myself." So I don't know if any of you ever played Second Life when it came out in the early 2000s, where you could take your little avatar and fly in and look around what was going on in the fake world in like Amsterdam, because that's where everybody met. But when I'm doing it very well, it can be like that. I'm right there in the middle of it. Nothing is really affecting me, but I can turn around and look. And then if I have the presence of mind, I can ask other questions, who, what, where, when, and why. Why is this situation happening? Where is the situation happening if I don't already know from my target? Who's involved? What is the likely outcome going to be? And that will come to me sometimes as words, where I will hear words in my head, so I'll think, well, that's a spirit guide. That will come as just knowledge, like a clear cognizance. I just know, well, that happens to be Egypt, and this is unrest in Egypt. Or, oh, I'm in Taiwan, and I'm in a bunch of people in Taiwan wanting China to go away. Oh, look, there's the Dalai Lama, and they're mad about that too. So I might be in them. I might be looking down at them when I'm really in it. But when I'm not as connected, it's like a tube. So I'm sort of looking through the barrel of a cannon, not a parrot gun, Joe, but a cannon. And it'll be round, and it's sort of a tunnel vision that I get. So that's Claudia's question. I hope that helps. If you have more questions, Claudia, let me know. Oh, and she also asked, is it our spirit that is able to travel and show us when we ask to see something far away? Are you seeing through spirit eyes? Who is showing us the picture? Well, it is you. It's your consciousness, and it's your consciousness is actually connected with all that is, and has a non-local component. So if you think of your consciousness like electrons on the World Wide Web, then it's like you can hit, if you target correctly, you'll go to an HTTP. I want to go see what's happening in Brazil at this conference today, and you type in that in your mind, that'd be targeting, and then all of a sudden you're in the live feed or in the summation news of what's happening or what happened at that conference, if you're before it or after it. But if it's happening at the time, well, actually, you can actually pick a time. I want to go here at 10:10 a.m. on Thursday, September 25th, and your consciousness, just like it's connected to the World Wide Web, can go there and do that. Is it your spirit? It's your consciousness. Soul and spirit, I don't have a little marker on either of those, what the enatman and the above is, so I'll just say consciousness. We are all consciously connected. So I hope that answers your question, Claudia. Is anybody in Spreaker have a question, Eric?
Yeah, I got one here from Joe Monk.
Okay.
Has Liz had any dire predictions for the Paracon?
I see very bad things happening to Joe Monk if he doesn't come to the Paracon. No. No, I don't have any dire predictions, but I can look at it. I'm a little bit too close to it because I'm going last week, part of why we're talking about this, it was last week or the week before, somebody said to me, what do you see about September 23rd and in terms of world events or political events for the U.S., and everything was fine on the 23rd, but then the 24th, 25th, 26th, maybe 27th, maybe 28th, it was all dark. And I went, ooh, it's all dark. It's like 3 days of darkness. And I don't surf the web looking for prophecies about the end of times or anything like that, because for the same reason that I don't like to find people for the police, I don't like looking at negative situations. But when somebody brought up, the 3 days of darkness, and somebody else online had predicted 3 days of darkness from the 23rd on, and I'm like, well, let's look into that. But let me look, Joe, hold on. So what I'm hearing, and this is probably from my guide, he's saying the same cast of characters that you get on SOR, doing the same things that they do on air, but just doing it in person and maybe being slightly more annoying about it. Like, we're never annoying. Why are they saying that? But maybe, it's going to be a very intense conversation, like a multiple roundtable intense conversation with things zipping in and out of the etheric plane. But anything bad, no. I think there would be a lot of giggling. What I sense that the intense conversation ends up in is Saturday night, a tremendous amount of giggling. So that's what I get, Joe.
I got another one here. And this might be something you want to handle via, personal messaging or something. But Tracy Barnes is asking or saying, Liz, I need some help. I'm making some serious life decisions lately and would love some first impressions on your part. Thanks so much. How is my health? I've been diagnosed with COPD and a black mass on my lungs. Be honest. I feel okay, but not okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you want to handle how you want to handle that. I will relay. I'll relay that to you.
Tracy, for those kinds of things, because that takes my physical energy and I have to go into your body and feel what your body feels, I'd rather do that not on the air. And I also can't diagnose or prescribe anything, but I can do a Reiki treatment combined with a remote viewing of your body and also a remote, I somatically feel it and I see it. And if you go on my website and you look at the price and you say, I can't afford that, but I can afford that, just send me an email and saying, my energy exchange for you doing this, Elizabeth, is less than such. Is that okay with you? Because I don't want to prevent you from having something that will help you. But please do go to my website, ElizabethAnglin.com, and see if you can afford it. And if you can, I'll be happy to do it. And if you can't, tell me what you can. Because if it's health, I do a lot of health readings. I can't diagnose or prescribe, but oftentimes what we find is that the reading will allow people to heal more quickly, and it will get them to get the help that they need from regular medical doctors, or go to the practitioners that might be like naturopaths or acupuncturists, etc., and give them a timeline for what they should expect from their healing in terms of energy. But no, it's actually, it would be very illegal for me to diagnose or prescribe anything for you, Tracy. So I can just say, you should check this out with, your doctor, or you should go see a doctor about this. That's normally how I work. So.
Yeah, point the diagnostic finger in the right direction, then hands off kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like here, turn this way, now walk over there. Okay, have fun storming
and
the castle.
You didn't hear it from me.
No, not at all. So, for example, because I'm not always right on. For example, I have a friend with a dog, and I can't diagnose or prescribe animals. I could get fined in New Mexico like $10,000 or something. Anyway, this dog's in Colorado, so New Mexico for, the $10,000 fine. And this is my best friend. And the dog had just had surgery this week on his spleen, and he wasn't feeling right. And they sent him home right after surgery, and I said, it feels like he's got inflammation and some kind of an immune response, like an infection. And I said, you should watch him and see if his temperature spikes or if he starts to get better. If he's still not feeling better tomorrow, take him in. Well, my friend didn't take him in. He waited 3 days, and then the dog really wasn't feeling well. And I said, I still feel an immune response, like an infection. Well, what had happened is his blood had agglutinated from the medicines. Do you know, like, when red blood cells stick together, Eric?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have patients sometimes that have what's called a cold agglutinin. If they get outside and the temperature is too low, their blood clumps. Or it'll be fine at body temp, but when we bring it down here and try and analyze it clumps up. And you run it through the analyzer, like, what? Yeah, I've worked with agglutinates a lot.
Yeah, so that was what was going on with the dog. I couldn't see that. My level of specificity was not agglutinated red blood cells. It was immune response and inflammation. And, you need to take him back in, which he did. And the dog has lived, and that's all good. But, it's always good to look at the obvious in front of your face, which is that the dog is not very happy. Right. And if you doubt yourself, well, then somebody who can remote view. But again, I didn't know that it was agglutination. I just knew there's some kind of immune response, which was the dog's immune system was killing the red blood cells after they clumped. So yeah, because then they'll get pulled out by the spleen, or it's lucky the dog didn't die. Now that you've encountered that, if you encountered it again, it's easier. Would you recognize it? Yes, I would recognize it because I have a conception of it in my brain. And so what will happen in remote viewing is that the more that you study something and the more that you learn about something, whether it's horses or dogs or, geology or astrobiology or whatever, the more that you learn about something, or the more that you have experience with something, you have in your brain memories that you may not be using, but those will come forward. Those will be spurred to come forward when you're doing a session. And it's either directly, like when they're pulled up, it's either that's exactly what it is, or it is something like this. You can get an analytic overlay. And I'll oftentimes get analytic overlays on person, like, oh, here's a guy and he looks kind of like Brad Pitt, which is somebody everybody knows. They'll have the same color eyes, same color hair, same color build, same build, etc. You won't be Brad Pitt, but the analytic overlay looks like that. So, but in the medical stuff, if I really know it well, like I know horses very well, I know the parts of the body of the horse very well, can be very, very specific when it comes to horses. I know horse diseases because I took care of horses my whole life, even more than dogs, because, you have a dog and dogs are usually okay until they're old. Well, horses get all sorts of stuff happening to them. And the more horses you take care of, the more you have to deal with all sorts of stuff that happens to them. And it worked for horse vet. So I get a lot more information because I have a lot more information in my database. So.
Okay, so it works like any other, it's just like any other skill or art form. The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Right.
It's like being able to look at a scattergram on a hematology analyzer and say, that looks like possibly some malaria. Once you see it one time, you know what it is, or you're scanning a slide and you see that red cell inclusion that's not supposed to be there, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, slow down, take a look at this.
Yep. Yeah, it's exactly like that, but you're not looking with your visual eyes, you're looking with your consciousness eyes. And bringing up information that you already have. So it's like one step removed from looking with your visual eyes. Sort of just
you're taking the middleman out then.
Yeah.
And I wonder sometimes, I have done so many gram stains and so many differential over the last few. There's times that I wonder after I've done a diff, or you count 100 cell, did I skip the middleman?
Yeah. Well, okay, we have a question here in the Spaced Out Space Travelers chat room from Joe Algeyer. Is it illegal to remote view across state lines? Ha. No, it's not illegal to remote view anywhere as far as I know. Is it ethical?
As long as they're not.
Is it stalking? I don't know.
Could be. It's always stalking if you get caught.
It's stalking if it's unsolicited and you keep doing it to someone. I had a guy who, and this sounds really bizarre, this was a few years ago and I had just started coming on Spaced Out Radio, and I got contacted by a guy who was in the MyLabs or the Rehabs, and he was trained in the Black Ops to remote view. And he started remote viewing, stalking me in the summer of 2015. Man, that just so made me upset because, how I'm up in Colorado. There was no way he could have known where I lived, what my address was there. And to look inside my house or my barn or, on my property about, where I was. And I didn't even know him. And he wasn't very nice. And he wasn't trying to help me. He was just trying to have power and control. I got really, really pissed at him and told him to go away. So there can be different groups that will use remote viewing for nefarious purposes, because nobody can stop you from using your consciousness, just like nobody can stop you from using your brain. And you can either be an evil genius or you can be, a humanist who has some ethical boundaries. It's really up to you. And it's the same thing with remote viewing, unfortunately. So I say tui on that.
Is there a way to shield that kind of activity, or?
A lot of people will do a mirror thing where they will put up intentions that mirrors will just show the person themselves, so that they'll be like in a ball of 360 degree mirrors. Or there might be, they might have other ways that suit them better than mirrors to put that up. I actually had my spirit helper sort of turn him around, so every time he thought he was looking at me, he was looking out in the opposite direction. And eventually he stopped. He went away. So. Let's see. Any other questions before we continue on?
I don't see. Let me backtrack. I don't see any. Remember, folks, if you're in Spreaker, I'm watching Spreaker. Some of you know, some of you don't. If you got a question, type it in all caps so it'll show up, and that way I can pass it on to Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
And we are getting close to a break here, so since if you have a plethora of questions for us after the break, please send them in all caps. We are going to go on. We're going to talk about some of the prophets, Padre Pio and Giorgio and Stigmata, and your questions, which are always more interesting to me. You know, I have a plan, but then it's like, ooh, that's more fun when you ask questions. So we will be looking for your questions when we come back after the break. Eric, do you ever have any prophetic dreams before we go?
Yes, I have. Of course, I didn't know until they happened. I guess that's the nature of prophecy. But yeah, I've had some of those, and not reliably. It's not something like Edgar Casey where I can lay down and say, okay, I'm going to be back in a half an hour and I'll bring you some prophecies. It has happened. And I've had situations where something has popped into my head that I hadn't thought about in ages, like, say, a specific episode of Johnny Quest. I turn the TV on, and damned if that is not the episode. And I haven't seen it for 20 years. Hadn't even thought about it.
All right.
But,
so I'm going to cut you off there because we're going to go to break. But I predict that we will be back after the break. And we are going to talk about prophetic dreams because Christina George was talking about hers. And Christina, if you're listening and you want to ask questions or tell us about it, we want to hear it when we come back right after this break on spacedoutradio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Marcum. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from Euphoria Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report, and let's find out the answers together.
We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird? Right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Looking for nighttime adventure? Old school radio that delves into everything out of the norm? Then check us out at Spaced Out Radio. This is Dave Scott. Every Monday through Friday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we're going to take you on a wild ride ranging from conspiracies to true crime and every ghost, alien, and Sasquatch story in between. We're always live, and we're always interactive with you. So join us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, we own the night.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guests and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Elizabeth Anglin and SOR.
Good evening and welcome back to Spaced Out Radio's Cosmic Passport. It is Sunday. I am your host, Elizabeth Anglin. Unless you're on the East Coast and it's already Monday, I feel very sorry for you. But I do want to welcome you back and thank you for listening. We are coming to you live from Madrid, New Mexico, the art colony hippie commune. Woohoo! And we're also talking with Eric Marcum, who is in North Carolina. We want to thank all of you who are listening in from around North America and the world, especially everyone at WQEE 99 Rock, the Key in Noonan, Georgia. Anyone who's up there from Florida, who is taking shelter. If you're listening, our thoughts and prayers are with you. We also want to give thanks to everybody at spacedoutradio.com, on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, Renegade Talk Radio, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and KTLK, The Fringe. Thanks for being here. We're back with Eric Marcum, and we're talking about prophetic dreams. And Eric was telling us about his prophetic dream before we left. And has that happened more than once, Eric?
Excuse me? That ding.
Prophetic dreams. Have you had more than one in your life?
Well, yeah, I have. Not so much lately, I don't think, because I don't sleep as well as I used to. And I think when I had my really good prophetic dreams, there was something that always set them apart. I knew what I saw was going to happen. It was almost like and even if the context was different, it's like I knew within a couple days when one of my grandparents was going to die, because I saw the ambulance outside of our house. And they didn't live even in our state, but it was like I knew who they were there for. And, a couple days later, when we had gone somewhere, and as soon as we came into the door, the phone rang, and I knew as soon as that phone rang that my grandma Marcum was dead.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was no surprise. I was just like, boom, Grandma's dead. I knew that. And I've had similar. Like I said, the Johnny Quest thing has happened twice. Honest to goodness. I don't know if there's any significance or if it was just my favorite episode or what, but several years apart. I hadn't watched Johnny Quest since I was a little kid, but there was an episode where they're with jetpacks and they're dropping paint bags on this invisible monster. Hadn't thought of that in freaking years. And then one day I just, that popped into my head, and about an hour later I turned on the TV, didn't even have to change channel. That episode was on. And it's not like I had TV Guide and I read it or anything like that. It just happened. And then later, probably 10 years after that, or, the timeline, isn't really important, but it was years later, the same thing happened. And I'll do that with music. I'll just get a feeling that a song I want to hear, and this just happened not too long ago, I wanted to hear a specific Volbeat song. I was listening to the Comedy Channel, and just like, for some reason, I changed, I hit the preset for Octane, and there was my Volbeat song I wanted to hear. So I've got a very unpredictable gift, I guess, and I've been told by a couple people that I'm an empath, which would explain a lot of the crazy crap that's happened to me in my life. Times that I got out of hand and didn't really know why I was getting out of hand. So
you were getting somebody else's out of hand, because I've done that before. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not mad. How come I'm so mad? Oh,
yeah, it used to happen with my parents a lot, and then of course they'd both quit being mad at each other and gang up on me because nothing brings two warring factions together more than an outsider.
Yeah, don't look at each other. Look at me. Well, it's interesting. Being an empath it's also part of remote viewing. It's also part of reading, and when I was much younger, I used to have prophetic dreams. I don't really have prophetic dreams anymore because I'm working with consciousness every single day, and because it has an outlet. And a lot of youngsters, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, get very freaked out with their intuition because they'll have prophetic dreams about disasters, or they'll pick up on something that has a lot of emotional energy to it, like a plane crash, or like a hurricane, or like a war zone, and that will play. Or even if they're not sleeping, if you're very psychic, you may have a vision of something that is basically a disaster for the people involved, and you might have this wonderful, neat, protected, nothing ever happens life, and simply because you are a psychic and an intuitive, and you're at somewhere down the line you're going to be a healer, you find yourself in the middle of a war zone. And it's not your war zone, it's just it's just information about the whole. It's information about something that needs to be healed. And so people that aren't trained tend to go to places where healing is necessary because they are empaths, are natural healers, and also because there's a lot of energy there. So it attracts people, but that information comes through when you're not trained. And when you're trained and you're kind of older and you're cynical and crap happens all the time, and you send your energy to it and your clearing and your prayers to it, because you read it on the news or you're seeing, people that you know on Facebook, like I am today, and you just go ahead and do your thing. It doesn't need to come out in your dreams. It doesn't need to come to you as a vision. But in the old days, it would come to people who were considered to be saints and mystics and healers and shamans, because there's no internet, right? There's no other way for someone to get information about what's going on with the greater world that is far away, that is non-local, than just through pure consciousness. And so it was...
Which is shamanism in the nutshell right there, is, gathering information in a non-local.
Right. Gathering information across time, across space. And there are stories, I went and read about shamans who got fired because they allowed their towns to get washed away by floods. Like they didn't see the flood coming.
So, was it they didn't see the flood coming, or that interfering would have been, interfering with that might have created a worse scenario down the line? Kind of like the Coventry dilemma with Winston Churchill. He knew the Germans were going to bomb Coventry because they had broken the Enigma code. And if they defended Coventry, that would have been a tip-off to the Germans that the Enigma code had been broken, and then they would change it. So he had to let Coventry be bombed in order to keep, without warning. I mean, they didn't do it on the sly. It's just Coventry got bombed. There was a great, a lot of destruction, loss of life, and he felt... he knew he was responsible for it because it was his decision. But in the long run, it was much more advantageous to the Allies to have the German Enigma code and know how to decode it. So maybe these shaman that things happen, maybe there was something worse that we don't even know might have happened if we moved everybody.
Well, and if you think about it, what if, for example, there was an illness, like if he had moved everybody and they had moved to some place where there was plague, or, and better let them take their chances staying where they are and facing the flood than everybody getting sick and dying of plague.
Right. So
that's possible too. But it was considered, the point is it's considered to be a very important job. You were considered to be a real shaman by how well your visions protected your people. And if somebody were to say, well, you're not very good, then you could be cast out of your community. And, I don't know what happened in Europe after the Roman Catholic and the Romans came in, because obviously all of that broke down pretty rapidly, and they would just cast you out because you had visions.
Right. It's like we have a local stake to tie you to. Elizabeth, I got some questions piling up in the Spreaker chat, if you'd like to address them, or we can wait.
No, let's go ahead.
Okay, Joe Monk wants to know, can Elizabeth remote view or get a reading on the next hurricane? Jose, I think it is, or Joe is the name for it, the one that starts with J.
We know what's interesting about that is that they predict that Jose is going to go around in a circle. And what I'm getting right now is that he's a little bit of a toddler, Like he bounces around, even just from that prediction of the circle. But I see him actually heading back over toward where Irma was, toward the north coast of Cuba, and then going up, not necessarily on the coast of Florida, but a little bit west of that. But he's a bouncer. He's, if you put a helmet on a 3-year-old and tell them to run around the house and they bounce into things and roll around in a circle, that's Hurricane Joe.
I wonder sometimes if we don't to somehow confirm by naming something, do we give it a personality?
Yeah, I don't know.
The power of names.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Jose is a bouncer, is a name per se, or Joe is, but it could also just be the heat, what's going on with the heat in the ocean, and that Jose is looking for whatever heat he can find, and he's headed toward that at any given time. So he sees the nearest heat source and he goes for it, and so bounces around. Plus all of the other energy that we were talking about last night with our Keith Andrews about people's negativity and doomsaying. We should not be doomsayers. Not that.
No, because once you give it form, once you give it voice, you give it form.
Yeah. You give it form, and it doesn't help anything. Any other questions?
Yes, let me scan back. John Teeter was here, has a question. Has Elizabeth had dreams of the distant future, like hundreds of years from now?
I have a sci-fi book in my head that I don't know if it is a reality or if it is a vision. Because I've gone way in the past to like a Lifetime on Sirius B and other planets, lifetimes there, and partially because I was shown in alien abductions these lifetimes, and so I actually went and remote viewed them. But then when I've gone forward, I have this, and some people don't believe in this, but I've been shown that there is another planet in an alternate dimension, but it's in a future timeline, like it's in the future of that dimension, where aliens are moving people. Now, some people would say, well, that's just an SQE, that's just a training thing, they're just testing you. But I have a friend who's an abductee in spirit who said, no, that planet is really there and they are really moving people there. And so, and if you were to line the two dimensions up, that planet would be far in our future. But because everything happens now, like you sort of break, it's not really time travel if you're going someplace in another dimension because you're not on the same linear time grid. So it's far in the future for us, but it's not far in the future in terms of travel because it's not in the same time grid. So anyway, I keep looking at this planet about what goes on there, and it kind of ends up like Foundation, like people get really religious about who founded the planet. And then I imagine myself going back saying, cut it out, religion is poison. You guys are... Stop that. You're doing all sorts of crazy stuff for religion that, it was like, you're simply a colony of humans, and you don't need to believe in this person who, was supposedly your founder. So I don't know if that's real or if that's, a projection or my own sort of, I'm bored and I want to write a sci-fi in my own head. And the only other place I've gone is 100 years in the future, but I've only gone up to 2113. And I didn't like it very much, so I turned around and came back. Oh, no, I've gone 200 years. Like, there's a bad period of time coming soon, which I don't want to be a doomsayer about, but things do get hotter. We do have flooding. We do have drought. We do have problems with GMOs. We do have problems with lack of good water. We do have problems with carrying capacity, which is too many people on the planet. and because of climate change, not enough food to eat, but also because of GMOs and having overly genetic engineered a monoculture, we don't have enough food to eat. And there's in a sense, there's a collapse, and there is a group of aliens that comes in and tries to run everything, and then that also doesn't work. And then between 200 and 500 years, we get to a really nice place. There are a lot fewer people on this planet, and they're doing things like biodynamic growing of plants, and they're using all recyclable. So, everything is run on ethanol. The cornfields are not, there's no chemicals on them. There's lots of butterflies and bugs and cats running up and down the cornfields to keep the mice at bay, and beautiful things like that. Gardens of chaos. All of this low entropy structure does get put into place, but it takes us almost 200 years to get it. And in between that is just a lot of, I'm not so happy with that. So
we got to get hit in the head with a frying pan to come to our senses, pretty much.
Several frying pans of different strengths and sizes over that 200 years. So yes, I have, but again, none of that's set in stone. Like Eric is saying, be careful of the visions that you have, because you could be visualizing a much better situation where we get it in the next 20 years or the next 10 years. And we start doing those things now, and we really fight back against the things that will cause us a lot of pain and suffering by starting to, across the board, change our laws and change our policies and change the way that we work with this world that we live with all the plants, all the animals, and do things that are low entropy versus high entropy, that are across the board sustainable for all members of society versus just the richest few. So.
Like things like, instead of worrying about having this beautifully sculpted lawn, put a garden in your front yard, or something.
Right. Put wildflowers for the area.
Right.
Yeah.
I kind of let my yard, I keep what grass is there mowed, and it kind of pisses me off, because if I don't, I'll get fined by the city. But I like my grass to be butt deep to a giraffe. I like that natural. I'm in the wrong place, I guess, for that, But the rhododendrons have taken over, and, it's just mass chaos other than the lawn I have to cut. And I think, if I could plant this in tomatoes, how happy I'd be. I wouldn't have to be wasting gas and time. I could be out here actually getting something out of the ground.
Yeah. So, like the lawn of tomatoes. I love that. Lawn of zucchini, because zucchini and squash will grow everywhere.
That's true. And you can do all kinds of stuff with zucchini. Especially if you're a diabetic, I mean, zucchini is one of your best friends. You can make pizza crust with it, and there's all kinds of things. Okay, so I need to buy a rototiller for next year.
You do. So we have a question from Michael McNeil in the Spaced Out SOR Space Travelers chat room. Question: what are cities like in the future? I've only really looked at cities because I'm not a city person. Like, once I escaped the city, I said, screw that, I don't care. But I've looked at Denver in between 2108 and 2113, and it has a dome. And it has rail. It looks like the kind of rail that they have in Japan, or possibly even more advanced than that, magnetic rail. And I don't see any cars. I don't see combustion engines. I see a lot of people with highly reflective clothing, so apparently we have kind of wrecked the atmosphere so that you don't really want to get too much sun on your skin. And I see a lot of, there's a lot of very Japanese-ness to it besides the dome. Like, people are living in smaller apartments and high rises and that sort of thing. Michael McNeil, is there space travel? I didn't see space travel then, but I know that no matter what, there will be space travel of humans, especially humans who are working with alien cultures. But in terms of the United States or whatever country is in place in the future here that's just humans, I'm not sure. I haven't gone there, but I know that there will be human beings continuing to do space travel with alien cultures. So that's pretty much my answer. Joe wants to know what his hair is like in the future. You're never going to cut it above bra level. Not that you're wearing a bra. So, don't worry about it. What we call bra level if you're, anyway, back of your ribs. Yeah. Besides, it didn't help thinking about
No, wait a minute. I lost. There was a really good question from Craig. He wants, in Spreaker chat, he wants to know, what's the best way to train remote viewing from beginner to experience? This isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, is it?
Well,
what's going to work for me might not work for somebody else, or, I try desperately, and whatever techniques I've tried haven't worked. But I know I'm capable of doing it, because I have. I just can't control it.
Okay, but are you, Eric, when you're trying techniques, are you trying to learn on your own, or are you trying to learn with a group?
I'm trying to learn on my own.
Okay. The first thing I would say to you and to Craig is get with a group of people who are learning, because there is a synergy and an energy of the energy. You pick up information from your teacher by being in the same space that they are in. And I'm going to... Eric Cooper's going to hate me for this, but I don't believe in taking Reiki class from a distance, because you're not in the same space as your teacher is in, and you don't get a direct energetic download from them if you're not in this, not as much of one, not as full of one. So if you take remote viewing with a group, you actually learn just through directly being in the energy field, and all of us have an energy field that's about 12 feet across. So if you're sitting at a table with a group of 6 or 10 people, you're picking up what everybody knows, and all of a sudden your system is integrating that, and it's uploading that, and it's playing with that. And then if you go through the protocols like they have at Farsight Institute or one of the other remote viewing institutes, it's way, way easier, because you're getting both the instructors, and if you have 2 instructors, you're getting the information from the 2 instructors, whether they tell you verbally or whether it's just in the energy field, and everybody who's around you, and they may have done things that are perfect for you that your system just uptakes. It's almost like when you need an infusion of minerals, and all of a sudden you're bathed in a mineral bath, or you're drinking a mineral-rich drink. Well, it's the same thing energetically when you take a class with other people, and it's a really good class. So I'd say that would be your first thing. Splurge or spend the money to go to a really good class with other people.
I think that's good advice, because I think what is wrong with me is being the scientist, being the skeptic. I've got that doubting Thomas that I'm getting in my own way. My own doubts, my own skepticism gets in the way. I know it can be. There's part of me that knows it can be done, but getting past that guard at the door is probably the issue.
Well, right, and you don't get validation. You don't get the perspective that your teacher or monitor or another person in class will have. So if you're doing, you're writing out your sheets of protocols, and you're doing your pictures, and you're running your keyword grids, or however you want to call it, and then when you look at your material, what you're often dealing with is your own critic and your own doubter. But if you have a person standing next to you saying, "Oh, look, there's the arm of the Statue of Liberty, and that's our target, and you drew the arm and the flame perfectly," or "Oh, look, you drew seagulls and you drew water, and then you drew the shape of an island. Well, the Statue of Liberty, which is our target, is on an island in water, and there are seagulls around it." Instead of you saying, "Oh, I didn't get it because I didn't draw a statue," somebody else can say, "Yeah, but you got everything that was around the statue."
Okay, so everybody's got that natural, that block or that naysayer. So with the group and the validation coming, the external validation, it helps, kind of gang up on the doubter and shut him up, or her up, as the case may be.
Right, and especially if you're not working with people who are in the group because they want to be special and they want to say, well, I'm so good at this and I'm the best one, and it's just because I'm so blessed. You'll know, like, if you have a teacher who is talking about everything that they did and how special it was, and the whole class is them telling stories about themselves, that is not the class that you want to go to. You want to go to the class where the teacher's like, get out your pens, here's your paper, here's our target number, now go. and doesn't even really talk about themselves much at all. Because it's not about them if you're learning, it's about them teaching you what they know about the process and the tools that they use to do what they do. Who cares? Who cares if they've solved world hunger with remote viewing? If you go to a class, you don't need to bathe in their glory. You just simply need to learn how to do what they do. So they should be focused on that.
In other words, it's an ego thing.
Don't go to teachers with ego, because I've had so many animal communications who have gone to animal communication classes where they spend 3 days listening to their teacher talk about all the things that he or she has done, and literally they can learn more in 3 or 4 hours of actually just doing, and me not saying anything about anything I've ever done, and showing them, look, see, you just did it. Now do it again. Now do it again. So. Yeah, that's my bugaboo about the this whole thing about psychics and remote viewers being special. It's like, don't be special, just practice. Darn you, That's just me. So.
I'm going to skip ahead. Craig had a follow-up question. But there's kind of a salient point. I want to jump ahead to Joe Monk's question, because this goes into, I started that new Facebook page about directed intention with the SOR and the FMP people. And this question kind of goes into, is circles around that. He wants to know, could everyone thinking about a storm that the news is constantly broadcasting create a tulpa storm? And I think I understand. Do we give that storm, like right now, you can't hardly go to any channel without hurricane reports. Does that, in a way, maybe feed the hurricane?
I think so. I think it directs the path somewhat. I think, you do have your typical Earth processes that it is feeding off of heat. It's looking for heat for energy. It's looking for an uptake of gaseous water for energy. But above and beyond that, with everyone being connected to the neural net of the planet, if you're all focused on a certain outcome or a certain event happening in a certain way, that's its own storm of energy that can be attractive to this Earth process, which is a hurricane. So you're kind of making an alleyway when you're all thinking about it, and you're all saying, oh, it's coming, oh, it's coming, oh, it's coming, oh, my house is going to, have its roof blown off. You can influence it in that way. So I had to learn that the hard way, because I used to be a dire predictor for myself, and I had to learn to say, cancel, cancel, cancel. My house is going to be fine. And I am divinely protected, and my property is divinely protected. And if you had enough people who were concentrating, for the most part, not always, on, a hurricane spinning out into the Gulf of Mexico and going around in a circle and, turning into remnants, I bet you if you had 6 million people doing that, you would have a different outcome. than what we're seeing right now, which we are trained to believe that we are victims and that we are not part of the creative process of the universe and the planet through our consciousness, through our being connected to everything consciously, and through our connection with the Creator God consciousness. And because of our training to be a victim, we oftentimes buy into it and looking forward to an event, help it happen. It doesn't mean you should, and I'm not doing the blame the victim thing. In fact, earlier tonight I was looking at one of these New Age teachers who was saying, here are all the ways you sabotage yourself. And I said, wow, if I could just blame people for everything that happens to them, I could become a New Age guru. No, that's not what I mean to do. But just be aware that when you are sort of welcoming and anticipating the negative to that extent, and everybody else is, it does have energy to help it happen.
Yeah, I almost want, okay, right now we've got more rain in the southeast than we need. But the west, is burning to the ground. There's got to be some way of directing and not flood water. I mean, there's got to be a way of directing the amount that's needed to the area it's needed. And what's the critical mass of people that have to have that intent? I don't want to inundate the West Coast with rain, but there's got to be a way to think about it, to visualize it, and get some of that moisture where it's needed without causing catastrophic, damage to everything, making the situation worse.
Right. Well, what's interesting is that there is a mystical profession, energetic profession of rainmaking. And there are people in the world who have actually been hired by farmers and ranchers in Montana and Wyoming and places to bring rain through the focus of will and intention and energy. And they are few and far between, but they have been considered highly effective. Even more effective than cloud seeding. Now, I don't know what the scientific, if anybody's actually studied that cloud seeding versus rainmakers. And even, the Native Americans down here in New Mexico, they schedule their corn dances in a line from Hopi, Zuni, and Acoma Pueblo, and then Laguna. They schedule them in a line so that they bring the clouds in from the west and it's sort of, even though they're different pueblos, they're all next to each other, adjacent to each other, and so the ones furthest to the west start their dance, and then the ones next over do their dance, and then the ones furthest to the east do theirs, and then the furthest to the east do theirs, and that's creating a pathway for the clouds and the rain to come in. And they've done that for 1,000 years, coordinated in that way, so they all have a different time for their corn dance. And if you go to, Acoma Pueblo is on top of the steep-sided mesa. If you go to their corn dance, which is right around this time, it might be in August, and you are there, and you can see as you're driving in that there will be a thunderhead over the mesa while they're doing corn dance.
Oh, wow. That's kind of, I know we're not supposed to trust, anecdotal or,
right,
that kind of information, but that's kind of hard to argue with.
Yeah, I mean, you have to go, you have to see it. I mean, don't trust my word for it. If you ever get a chance to come in August or September to when they're doing the dances for rain, because what they're trying to do is extend monsoon season. Monsoon season starts to end about now, and so they're extending it so that things will continue to get water. And it's amazing to see what it looks like when you drive up and they're dancing.
I saw rain in the desert one time, and there was actually a rainbow in it. And I used to have the picture, but I don't know what happened to it. When I was in Bullhead City, Arizona, it just happened to look out the window and see that. And it was, what were the odds? It was just one of those things. It's one of those Kodak moments that you hear about, and then when you see it, you're like, what? They're really, it does rain in the desert. I'll be darned.
Yeah. No,
and it is beautiful because it's not what you expect to see.
And you also hope that you're not in a bad place when it's raining, or that it's not raining somewhere upstream of you very, very hard, and then all of a sudden it all washes in your direction. Because deserts have really bad
gully
floods.
washer, yeah.
Yeah, we have floods that wash everything away. So, anybody else have any questions in Spreaker? Or should we...
Well, let me backtrack a little bit. I'm sure we got some. Let's see. No, that's directed to me. Char wants to know, how did you know the year? Did you go to that year on purpose? Or you mentioned going 2113. Personally, as a Rush fan, I would have stopped at 2112, but hey.
I was doing for a few years, 100 years in the future to the day that I was doing remote viewings. So it would occur to me that, hey, I want to see what's happening 100 years in the future now, from 2008 to 2013. And then I got very busy because I was finishing my book in 2013, 2014, and I haven't done it since. So it was just a matter of I'd get a gander to look 100 years in the future, and I did that for about 5 years, once or twice a year. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm looking. When did Elizabeth have visions of the future? Maybe the problems of the time she had those visions may have influenced the content of the visions. Okay, yeah, and kind of the opposite of the observer affecting the observation affecting the observer.
Well, it's when I was young, so I would have to say this. When I was younger, I used to have a lot more visions of my past and my past lives. And the problems of my life at the time very deeply influenced how I viewed the visions of my past life. And so, I suffered quite a bit with visions of my past lives because I really believed in karma. I believed that I was trying to heal relationships from the past. And then I got older and I sort of went, wait, I'm not that person anymore. And so even if I'm looking at something that's from my past, in the spiritual realm, I am a born-again Christian. I do believe that we are living in a time of forgiveness, that our karma is only karma if we choose to accept and judge ourselves and allow ourselves to be tortured by the things that we regret. And it doesn't mean we should be amoral, and it doesn't mean that we should do mean things, or it doesn't mean that we should do thoughtless things. It means that if you've done something in the past that you regret and you ask for forgiveness, or you have had something done to you by someone in any lifetime in the past, and you are willing to forgive them, you don't have to keep replaying the cycle of karma over and over and over again. That forgiveness is ours for the taking. And so, not sort of getting it in my 20s, a lot of my visions of the past were deeply colored by my inability to forgive myself and my inability to forgive others. And then I got older and I got tired of having these visions of the past, which brought up pain. And I really looked for spiritual guidance about how to overcome this pain. And it really came down to forgive, forgive, forgive. And when I look at the future, I could look at what I've seen in the future and some of the things I've seen, and I could be really mad. When I was younger, I had some visions that were pretty typical for abductees about a time when everybody is going to be thought controlled, and there'll be a lot of drought, and there'll be floods and not enough food. And myself being in it with people that I knew and avoiding the sort of group of aliens that was controlling everyone and avoiding the mind control situations. And I was mad. I was mad that would happen. I was mad that these things would be allowed to happen to human beings. And I really wanted to get active and prevent it from happening. And now that I look at it, it's sort of like, you know what? There's just too many players involved with this. And the best thing that I could do, if it happens, if it doesn't happen, it's sort of like the 12 Chairs song, hope for the best, expect the worst. You know, it's
right.
Like, I think I'll hope for the best, expect the worst, you know, because if you perseverate and obsess about a potential negative event, you're not living in the now, you're not seeing your blessings, you're not spending your time with the people that are right in front of your face. You're all, and you end up, what happened with me is I ended up getting chronic fatigue because I was just so overwhelmed by this potential negative future. And I was so mad about it. And I wasn't forgiving anybody anything, you know, either in the past or in the future. And for me to get over that chronic fatigue, I had to have a whole spiritual reorganization, which came about through my Reiki training and through healing, you know, healing myself mentally, emotionally, and physically. But yeah, so yes, absolutely. You can suffer from what you see in your visions, and you can suffer based on where you're at in terms of, you know, are you living in the moment? Are you living in the past? Are you living in the future? And are you forgiving or not forgiving? And counting your blessings that are right in front of your face.
It's like anticipating the future or anticipating something ahead is doing disservice to the now.
Right. It does disservice to your body in the now. It does disservice into your potentials for today and tomorrow. You know, it's okay to go out and have a nice dinner with a friend, or do something fun, or have, you know, fall in love, or, you know, buy yourself something you can afford that you've always wanted but thought you shouldn't splurge on. It doesn't mean you should be an idiot consumer, but it's okay to enjoy your life and the fact that you're still breathing and you're still in a body and you're still here, and there are rainbows and sunrises and birds and cats. And
cats,
dogs.
Mostly cats.
Mostly cats, yeah. Wonderful cats. And dogs and horses. So it's okay. Okay, Claudia has a question. Oh, shoot. Oh, no, it is going to come up. Claudia says, I always envisioned a big coliseum with everyone inside praying with intention, thoughts with intention, that miracles could happen. Do you agree with this? Seems a massive consciousness praying or using thought together with intention would be very powerful. Well, that's kind of like the Science of Mind folks, the Maharishi University folks. Louise Hay comes from that background of people praying together and meditating together with intention. And TM, transcendental meditation, is that's also the Maharishi thing too. Yeah, I think that I once went to a congregational church in Wollaston, Massachusetts, where there was the best pastor in the universe, and he had everybody in church. The whole thing was everybody praying for everybody else, and it was the most fantastic thing I ever went to, and I kept going back because every Sunday it was the most fantastic thing just to do. So yes, I agree with it, Claudia. I think that'd be a good thing.
Here we go. Kevin Liggett's got a question, and I have heard you answer this before, so I'm going to ask it for his benefit.
Okay.
Kevin asks, if you are a born-again Christian, how do you accept the concept of past lives? I ask because I fight this battle.
When I was born again, and it's in my book Experience, because it's one of the most important experiences of my life, it was a true mystical experience. It was not me going up to the front and the pastor saying, okay, you put your hand up and you invited Christ into your heart and now you're changed. What happened was I didn't trust the pastor because he was my neighbor and he was bad to animals, so I thought something was really kind of wrong with him. And I was right, and I'll get to that later. But what happened is I had a mom who was spiritually abusive. She started out as an agnostic, going to the Methodist Church. She became an atheist and a skeptic. And at the time, just before I became born again, she was telling me that I had no soul, I had no spirit, I was nothing, I was dust, I wasn't important, and literally suggesting that I kill myself, even though she wouldn't directly say that. And I had an experience a month before I was born again where I was going to kill myself because she was abusing me and stuff was happening with aliens. And, they were doing things with my head. And I had this terrible headache. And, so I was going to commit Harry-Carry with a big knife and make it really ugly so that it would hurt her bad. And I go out to the barn behind my house, and it's 20 below zero. It's January. It's right after my birthday. I'm putting the horses up because I'm at least going to make sure they're taken care of because they never did anything to me that was bad. And as I'm going to put the horses in the barn, my horse Joe comes up, and he, instead of going into his stall, he walks straight up to me and he puts his forehead against my heart. And he just keeps tapping me in front of the heart with his forehead. And I feel him saying, I know you don't feel good, but I'm here. See, I'm here. I'm right here in your heart. And then after he did it, I said, oh, Joe, thank you. And this isn't about you. You're such a good horse. And then after I get him, I said, come on, you need to go in. It's really cold. It's time to eat. But as I turn his head away and I look at his chest has been opened up with a triangular cut. And I can see his heart beating underneath, like it's frozen, like all of the outer the blood has frozen because it's 20 below zero, and you can see under the musculature, which is the thicker musculature has been pulled apart, and the thinner musculature, you can see the heart beating under there. And I hear a voice in my head that said, you are chosen, like chosen by God, chosen by the Creator. You are important, and you are really failing at this human thing, because look at this horse. Even though he's in pain, even though his heart's ripped open, he is being compassionate to you first before he's complaining about his situation, and he's surviving. And this was like a voice in my head sort of, smacking me upside the head saying, look, you're here for a reason. It's important that you're here. Even if you're in pain in your heart, it's important that you don't put yourself first and learn how to love other people and be there for other people. And so I just, freaked out. All of the, I had heard this voice in my head, and like you can hear my dog. And I thought, after that, I thought there has to be a soul or a spirit. So I went to church with my best friend, and Wyatt stopped, and I decided to raise my hand and have Christ come into my heart, because I was like, maybe that was Christ. Well, I don't know if it was Christ, but when I raised my hand, when it was time for people to become born again, all of a sudden Christ was standing right in front of me, and there was just this light pouring off of him and this love, and it was filling up my heart. And he was saying, unlike what the church was saying, he said, I don't give you life everlasting, you have life everlasting. And he just played out all these lifetimes in the past, and he played all these lifetimes in the future. And he said, the point is not that you're not good enough to have life everlasting and you need me to give it to you. The point is how much you learn to love and to follow my example in all of those lifetimes. That was basically the message. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Anybody still there?
Yeah. I mean, I had a similar event in college. I got really down and had a .357 mag in my mouth, and my cat jumped in my lap. And this cat was quiet, and he looked up and meowed, and I probably only heard this cat meow 3 times in his entire life. And it made me stop. And just that pivotal moment, because, I was that close. But it took me out of myself, made me think, okay, one, it's in the summer, it's hot in that room. By the time my parents get home, there's going to be a mess. Repercussions actually started to sink in.
Right.
And it was just because at that point, that cat jumped up in my lap. So, I think miracles happen all the time. We just don't recognize them for what they are when they happen. You have to stop and think, there's something, something kept that from happening, or you might get caught in traffic, or, I couldn't find my wallet one day. This actually happened since I've been working here. Couldn't find my wallet one day, and I was getting stressed out because, damn, I'm going to be late to work. Well, as it turned out, had I left on time, I would have been involved in a horrible traffic accident on Louisville-Clemens Road. The timing would have had me there. So sometimes you're where you need to be.
Right. Even if you're considering doing something, like divine intervention is real, it's a real thing, and we don't always know how many times we are divinely protected, that we have somebody looking at, we have everything looking at, we have Creator, we have, if you're Christian, you can call it Jesus, God, whatever you want, but divine intervention is very, very real. So even if there's prophecy of something bad happening, you can always ask for divine intervention. Now, my divine intervention for the woofing is to go let the dog out during the break, which is coming up next. We are going to come back, and hopefully we'll get to stigmata, because I want to talk a bit about Giorgio. But, it doesn't matter. Any questions that you guys want to ask are good. We'll be back right after this break. Thank you so much for listening to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Radio.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com, starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Marcum, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories From alien encounters to the latest conspiracies, you won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guests and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Elizabeth Anglin and SOR.
Good evening and welcome back to Spaced Out Radio's Cosmic Passport with Elizabeth Anglin. I am your host, coming to you from the Spaced Out Radio Cosmic Cruisemobile with Eric Marcum driving in the passenger side tonight. We're getting nerdy and actually only sort of kind of nerdy tonight. We are coming to you live. We are taking questions in the chat rooms, on the SOR Space Travelers chat room, and also on the Spreaker chat room. And if you have any questions for us, please feel free to put them in all caps. I do want to welcome back everyone listening in from around North America and the world, especially those at WQEE 99 Rock the Key in Noonan, Georgia, at spacedoutradio.com on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, Renegade Talk Radio, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and KTLK. I thank you very much for being here. If you are displaced this evening, our thoughts and prayers are with you. We hope that you have all the comfort that you need and desire, and everything that you need and desire to get through this time. And if you are listening and you can send help or prayers or aid in any way to those who are displaced this evening, please have at it. It's a wonderful way. And envision as you send help, things turning out for the best for all concerned, even though this is a very difficult time. We're back. We're talking about predictions, remote viewing, prophecy, and psychic stuff. And I'm here with Eric Marcum. Eric, how are you doing?
Doing fine. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So let's see. Do we have any more questions, or do we want to go back and talk about stigmata or other prophets?
Can I do a shout out real quick before we get into Padre Pio? Because he is a fascinating character.
Sure.
The champ, Nick Orion French, is in the Spaced Out Radio Spreaker chat. How you doing, champ? That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Good to see you, Nick. I'm glad you're there. All right, so Padre Pio was a stigmata. And Eric, it's talking to you, and he was also a prophet. He was one of the prophets who talked about the 3 days of darkness, which when somebody asked me about September 23rd, I saw 3 days of darkness and they freaked out. So this is why we're talking about this, just because it was like, hey, it's going to be dark the 24th, 25th, and 26th, and maybe 27th. So I looked up Padre Pio, and he is famous for exhibiting the stigmata for most of his life. And the stigmata is basically the wounds of Christ on the cross. He was canonized in 2002. He was beatified in 1999 and canonized in 2002 by Pope John Paul II. Now, skeptics love to say that most stigmata were fake, and somebody has even come out and said that Padre Pio used carbolic acid to create his situation. Now, I have actually been for a couple of days near and sitting by and Giorgio Bongiovanni, who is a stigmata, and I did not notice anything that would deliver carbolic acid nor make him bleed in the way that he did. What I did notice is that his energy changed significantly when he started to bleed. And he would usually bleed when he was getting like a divine download. Like I could feel his energy change, and then he would be thinking about something we were discussing, and then he would start to bleed. So anyway, Eric, what do you think about this whole stigmata thing, being a medical technologist?
There was so much more to him than the being a stigmata, and I don't think the carbolic acid thing would work because he didn't have scars in between his bleeding times. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a matter of faith, and I think if it's somebody like this, Padre Pio was a very, very, staunch believer. I think it's probably, even if it's psychosomatic, mm-hmm. I think it's possible. Even if it's not a divine thing, I think a person could be tuned in enough to make it happen. He did bilocations and all, there's a lot of stuff about him that just very interesting. I believe he's also incorruptible. I don't believe he's rotted, to put it bluntly.
So his body is still in the same state as it was. Like Tibetan saints they say the same thing about certain Tibetan saints, is that they don't really rot away. They might over 1,000 years mummify or something, but they don't rot. Is that right?
Yeah, it's. I'm doing an image search now, and it looks like he's just. I mean, he obviously looks dead, but I mean, it doesn't look like he's getting that bad.
So
you never know about these people, though, because there's some of those that they say they're incorruptible, but when you actually look into it, it's like, well, she turned black, and we had to kind of like coat her with wax and paint her pink again. Well,
right.
That's not incorruptible. That's fine.
So he had the wounds of crucifixion, but he also had the stigmata would smell of the perfume of flowers, which is a phenomenon mentioned in the stories of the saints, lives of several saints, and often referred to as the odor of sanctity. And I've had that happen in mediumship classes when the medium that I have, the spirit that I have come through, because I don't like to do trans-channeling. I'm so distrustful of letting another spirit have my body that I will only trans-channel for Mother Mary, and when she comes through, there's flowers. And it smells like roses. So, and I think of my Mother Mary as Guadalupe, who is, roses are associated with her. So, and I'm not Catholic. I am actually sort of a non-denominational, born-again, charismatic Christian. But as a medium, as a spiritualist, you do what you do, where you do it. It doesn't matter. So he does biolocation, levitation, prophecy, miracles, and extraordinary abstinence from both sleep and nourishment. So he didn't necessarily have to sleep or eat. He was able to subsist for 20 days at Verafino on only the Eucharist without any other nourishment. And he had the ability to read hearts, the gift of talking in tongues, the gift of conversions, and he had the fragrance from his wounds. That's a lot of stuff for one guy to have going on.
That's sort of the Christian Saint Grand Slam, really.
Yeah, like everything. He did not come from parents his parents couldn't read, but they memorized the Bible. So this was not an academic situation for him. He wasn't one of those Roman Catholic Church academic guys. This was all about, I guess, living faith for him. And the church had to dismiss charges that he faked the stigmata. The carbolic acid was used as a sterilizing agent when the Spanish flu came around in 1917. So they knew why there was carbolic acid in his possession. And it was injections needed to fight the Spanish flu, apparently. Does that make sense? What injections would they have had?
God, I mean, would they use carbolic acid to sterilize instruments? That's kind of, anything I say to that would be speculation. I'm not sure the connection. I don't think carbolic acid would be injected as a medicine.
No, just as a sterilizing agent for the needles.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because they didn't have. I think Joe Lister, the guy they named Listerine after, I think Lister was one of the first people to think about decontaminating surgical instruments in between surgeries instead of just wiping them off on his shirt. Believe it or not, folks, people used to do that. So yeah, that the practice of actually using something like carbolic acid as a disinfecting agent. So you'd soak your instruments on it. Possibly, you could use it for wound cleaning. I mean, it's, you know, people think of carbolic, or you hear the word acid, and of course you think, you know, something dissolving. But carbolic acid was actually used, I think, as an eye wash. That was one of those things everybody had in their medicine chest. You know, our great grandparents and our grandparents, witch hazel and carbolic acid, also known as phenol, would have been something that, you know, every home had a bottle of. It was just sort of an all-purpose astringent, you know, like iodine, methylate, alcohol, something like that.
Cool. So so that would be the reason why they would have it. What's interesting is the way they talk about his transverberation and stigmata. In Wikipedia, they say, the soul being inflamed with the love of God, which is interiorly attacked by a seraph, who pierces it through with a fiery dart. This leaves the soul wounded, which causes it to suffer from the overflowing of divine love. But when he got the stigmata, he got very sick, and it was during World War I, and he had a vision of Christ appeared, and it had pierced his side. And he had a physical wound on his side, and then there was a transverberation or piercing of the heart, is what they called it, and the union of love with God. And the Allies began the 100 Days Offensive, which led to the armistice with Germany and the end of the war. So his piercing of his heart, the piercing of his side, and his vision of Christ happened on the day, or happened just before, or just after Padre Pio had this union with Christ. And so I think they're trying to make the idea that, you know, Christ became present in the world through Padre Pio, and an offensive happened which led to peace. That could be, could not, maybe isn't. But that would be considered miraculous. But he was not a happy guy himself during that time. His entire appearance looked altered, as if he had died. He was constantly weeping and sighing and saying that God had forsaken him. So he wasn't having a good time.
You know, the story of Job all over again.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, when I was with Giorgio, you know, hanging out with Giorgio for a couple days in 1996, when he would start to bleed, his energy did go down. Like it was as if the bleeding corresponded with not being as full spiritually as he normally was. And it was almost like he had, you know, when he would come back to himself, or his spirit would come back to him, the bleeding would stop. So is this possibly a kind of genetic disorder, you know, energetic or physical disorder, Eric? Or is that just meh? Like, you know, could stigmata be like a bleeding disorder? Are you still there, Eric? Okay, what's going on? Okay, I seem to be missing it. Oh, you back, Eric?
Nope, I'm back, yeah.
Okay.
I had a little crisis I had to take care of real quick on the other side.
Do you need to go, and I can look and see if there are any?
No, I'm back. I just had to, you know, Char's bringing up a good point. All saints go through the dark night of the soul. It's almost like, how far do we have to get knocked down to actually get in tune? It seems like people are their most pious and their most open to the divine message when they've just had the living crap slapped out of them. I know I am. In my life, I've been rock bottom, actually below the rocks, when it would finally dawn on me to.
Oh, yeah. You know, yeah, I mean, I became born again after not wanting to be on the planet anymore, and being told that there was no reason for me to be here, and that I was just dust and totally non-important by the one person who should really love you is your mother. So, as down as it gets it does seem to be kind of that peaks and valleys, manic depressive sort of thing. Wow, yeah. It's really, really bad. Oh wait, no, it's not. It's all part of the plan. Yeah, Char, I hear you. You do, but if you are, have you ever met those people who have never had anything bad happen and they seem totally hypocritical? They're hypocrites,
Yeah.
Real faith.
Like,
yeah.
They don't know how good they got it. It's like, or one of the funniest things that happened when I was raising my stepkids is something very minor was going wrong in the youngest daughter's life, and it was something that as an adult you wouldn't even think about it. And she, in the most earnest voice and serious as she could be, haven't I suffered enough? Donna and I just looked at each other and started laughing. It was ridiculous. But I see people like that, it's like, oh, damn, I got to put new tires on my BMW motorcycle. Okay, you got a BMW motorcycle, you're don't complain.
All right, we have a complaint in the SOR Space Travelers chat room. I have fallen down on my job. There has been a password issued by Joe Algier. The password for the SOR Space Travelers is salsa. Use it carefully. Passwords should be used very carefully and, not lightly. So thank you, Joe Algier, for giving us that complicated and mind-bending password, salsa. I'm going to dance on out of here with that one and take my plethora of thoughts about it elsewhere and get back to the conversation at hand, since you were complaining. You said, no more passwords for her. Oh, right, there's a password. Okay, anybody else have any questions in Spreaker?
Let me backtrack a little bit. Oh, let's see. I'm wondering about, you're talking about the darkness, as I'm backing up here. Almost wonder if that's not because something's going to happen to put the fires out, like the rain's finally going to come, and the 3 days of darkness isn't solar darkness, it's just steam in the air. That would be nice. The end of the West Coast burning away to ash.
I don't know if we have any. Sorry, I was on mute. I don't know if we have any more questions about Padre Pio.
Oh, there you are. Everything went mute there for a second.
Did you hear what I was saying, that he was making this prediction for Europe, not the United States? And he sent letters around to other churches and other places in Europe, So he really saw this as being something that he needed to warn European people about. I don't think he thought about the United States at all. But also, it wasn't about rain. It was, poisonous gases, dust. If you were out in a field, you would be burned if you were not a believer. It was really about, if you saw this darkness come, you should get a blessed candle, keep your windows closed, don't breathe the air because there would be poisonous gases, and stay inside with your candle and pray. And don't go outside.
To a man in the early 1900s, it sounds like he described a nuclear fallout event, doesn't it?
Or Pompeii.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, or even think about Pompeii. If you have a volcanic eruption that's very, very large, and they know, for example, that when a certain volcano in Iceland, which Jökulárfljótið, whatever it was.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
When it erupted, there was so much poisonous gas that it knocked out people in the UK, and the northern end of the UK. It burnt all the plants and burnt people in the fields with sulfuric gases. And so it could be a nuclear bomb. It could be volcanic eruptions. We were talking last night about the Canary Islands, and if that volcano in the Canary Islands goes, and it's really that big, it would not just be tsunami. Perhaps it would even be wide scale, poisonous toxic gases for 3 days. So, yeah. Okay. Plethora of bad news here, everyone. Sorry about that dead air. I was on mute and did not know it. It happens to the best of us and the worst of us. So, yeah, anybody have anything to say about the idea of what might cause 3 days of darkness with burning toxic gases? If you do, I'd be happy to hear them. Type them out in all caps.
Joe's got I never even went this way. I didn't think about that. Joe, could Elizabeth view that crazy little fella in North Korea? He might cause the 3 days of darkness.
I can look at him real quick. What's his name? Tell me his name again. I'm getting tired.
Kim Jong-un, yeah.
Okay, Kim Jong-un.
I think.
See, my superstition is that if I love and eat enough Korean food and wave nicely at Korea, everything will go well. Hold on a second. No, spirits are saying no. They're saying that he will saber rattle, and he will come back around to threatening again in the spring. But there will be more saber rattling from him this month. But it doesn't look like... It looks like more things that wind up in the ocean and are shot generally toward Japan, but really don't do much. And then it looks like something coming up again in the spring. He doesn't really have a plan, and I think he just wants attention. And I hope he's not listening, but he really just seems to want attention. Like, hey, we're still here, and we still don't have enough food, and these sanctions that you've had on us forever really stink. But I still want to be the ruler and do what I want. But hey, we're still here.
Yeah, it seems to be like a spoiled brat who stomps and cries and screams until they get their way. And until recently, he would do the saber rattling, and the relief ships would show up. And this time around, it doesn't seem like that's happening.
Well, do you think our president at this time is going to be ever so giving?
Probably not. Well, it's sort of, North Korea is the creation of another, more or less what's going on there has been created or allowed to fester by another superpower. So maybe it's time that other superpower needs to spank their brat, give him a timeout or something.
You mean China?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If they even care anymore, it's just sort of like, oh, look, we created that. Let's go away now. Let's look at that. I'm going to go back to the 23rd and see what I see around that. I actually do see something around Europe, and I see something in the water around the UK. I don't know what in the water that would be.
North Sea?
North
because
Sea.
They have is it in the North Sea? Because they have a
Yes.
lot of, maybe there's going to be a oil well, because they drill a lot of natural gas and a lot of oil off the North Sea. They have offshore refineries.
Yeah,
That's not the right word. Drilling platforms.
They have a lot of drilling. I see something in the North Sea on the, northeast. I guess that's northeast side of it. I never know where England. I guess it's the east northeast side of the UK, and but it seems like it's something big. So it maybe it's some kind of terrorist attack on the UK or something in the North Sea that influences the UK.
Yeah, that's that area between Germany, Norway, that little
Yes.
common area, Denmark, Germany, United Kingdom, and Norway. They almost circle it, but not quite.
Right. Yeah, there's like a triangle of something that's going on there during the 24th, 25th, and 26th. So maybe somebody gets something on a boat, but it has to do with the UK and it has to do with Europe. And that would go along with what Padre Pio saw, or maybe we're just not getting along with the UK anymore because we have an interesting president who decides he doesn't like people sometimes. I don't know. Hold on one second.
Well, they're having a lot of trouble with some domestic unrest. I'm almost wondering if one of their nuke plants doesn't get like a meltdown of Fukushima in Great Britain, because they have a lot of nuclear reactors.
Yeah, nuclear power Great Britain. Sorry for my typing. Let me see if I can see where this is, because this looks not Newcastle. It might be just south of Newcastle and it's on that coast or around that coast. So the closest one, okay, so I'm looking, Sizewell is not Newcastle, and Bradwell would be, or it would have to be Hartlepool, Sizewell, or Bradwell, from what I'm seeing. And it seems closer, but it almost seems like it's out to sea. Maybe it is Hartlepool. Because Hartlepool is open and Sizewell is open, but Bradwell is closed. Huh. Interesting. Let me look at them.
There is you can see. Well, what do they do in the Netherlands? Because that is so close. Right, 20 miles from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something, not necessarily United Kingdom, but maybe the wind would go that direction. It could be something that happens in Belgium, the Netherlands, or Germany that shoots across the North Sea and impacts
the UK.
England. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I were in the UK and listening to this, I would look at the thing that comes up. If it is one of theirs, Hartlepool comes up as the most obvious, and that's Hartlepool, which is it's either in Scotland. No, it's in northern.
It's between Middlesbrough and Sunderland, right on the coast.
Yeah.
Near Durham, Darlington. It's on the about midway down the east coast of Great Britain.
Yeah. Let's look at oil rigs. Sorry if we're getting a little bit too nerdy for you guys. But that's what I'm seeing. So if anybody has anything to say that they want me to look at, active drill rig. Oh, that's North Dakota. Maybe the North Sea doesn't want us to know where the North Sea oil rigs are. Well, they're talking about leaving ones that are there rather than removing them. That's something that's happening now. Conservationists say just go ahead and leave them versus remove them if you're not using them, which is interesting.
Yeah, because what happens as they inevitably decay and fall apart. If there's pressure up under there, you've got what was that? Bentwater or that thing that happened in the Gulf.
The Deepwater Horizon.
Deepwater Horizon, yeah.
And that was an exploratory oil rig. It wasn't one that had been working and then was decommissioned. It was a wrong exploration.
One of the things I wonder about, and I've been trying to get a guest to come on, a knowledgeable guest, not just an enthusiast. I want an honest-to-God geologist talking about the abiotic theory of oil production, that it's a hydrocarbon that the Earth creates anyway, with the way the plate between the heat, the pressure, and the plate tectonics. That's just, it's a natural, basically, lubricant that the Earth produces. Because they've had, and the reason they call it a fossil fuel is because some of the early deposits did have organic matter in them, but that it's not necessarily always crushed up dinosaurs.
All right, so Joe Algier in the Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers chat room. Do you have anything to say about what Eric just asked, because you are a geologist and you were an oil guy, and I did get you fired when I worked for Greenpeace, and I apologize greatly for that. That's Joe, who you really want to talk to, and maybe he'll come on. Joe, will you come on and talk about this? Just write to us and let us know. Don't make me mad, or I'll work for Greenpeace and get you fired again because I'm evil like that. No, I'm kidding. Okay, what else are we going on to? Prophecies. I mean, one of the things, I have a thing against oil rigs because I am not. Oh, he'll never come on. Well, that just is. No, Joe is not coming on. That just is wrong. I have a thing against oil rigs because I actually am not a climate change denier. And I'm not a climate change denier, not because climate change, the climate is always changing anyway. And we have had I do believe that petrochemicals and burning, that human beings being burners, and I've heard this from the Bigfoot, they've called us burners. We burn everything. We burn the trees, we burn the rainforests, we burn fossil fuels, we burn wood. We're putting so much crap into the atmosphere, and carbon-based crap in the atmosphere. And it is warming up, and things do warm up. So we are becoming part of the world's changing condition and the changing environment. And we have been, especially as we've gotten a greater population that burns more and more and more. And to say that we're not is to pretend that nothing happens when we do something different or when we change a condition. And Eric, maybe you can speak to this about homeostasis. The body needs to maintain a homeostasis. I believe the Earth tries to maintain a homeostasis. And when you change a condition quickly, when you heat things up rather quickly, you end up sending the Earth or the body into shock. And that shock is going to manifest as huge storms, as droughts, as locusts, as long periods of dry, and then some periods of extreme wet, as flooding, as, plants and animals having to move where they lived before because there isn't the habitat that there was before. So we're actually sending the Earth into a state of shock by the number of people burning things, whether it's fossil fuels, whether it's trees, whether it's coal, which is a fossil fuel. We're changing the homeostasis of the system. And if you don't believe in that, I don't know what to tell you, because it's just part and parcel of how systems work, and living systems work, and the Earth is a living system. So anyway, comments on that. Is climate change a conspiracy brought about by scientists? Well, no. Somebody was telling me that scientists wanted to collect like this $4.6 million for research, and that's why they were coming up with climate change research, is because there was $4.6 million available. And I went, that's nothing. There are single grants at MIT and cancer research that are $5 million. Just one grant for cancer research training, which I used to manage for the NIH. It was a $5 million grant. So to say that all the climate change people across the world are all coming up with climate change papers for $4.6 million is absolutely ridiculous, because that is a teeny tiny itty bitty drop in the research bucket, especially when you spread it across all the academic institutions in the world, especially when the universities who are accepting that are going to take 68% overhead off the top of it. And literally what you have left is 32% going to the actual researcher who's doing the research and writing the paper. So you'll never convince me that the people who are writing about climate change are doing it to get rich. It just isn't the case. And what is more likely is that some of these geologists, like Joe, who are writing for the petrochemical company, not that Joe would do that, are making money to write papers that attack the idea of climate change, because it is better for the oil companies, it is better for the car companies, it is better for Cummins diesel, it is better for everybody who makes any kind of engine to not have to put in strict protocols for cutting back on their emissions, and to not look for, and not have to do a whole new redesign of all the engines so that everything is now solar or something else. What do you think, Eric?
I think one of the problems with climate change, CO2 is the bad guy. Actually, it's not. CO2 is what plants need. I think where we get in trouble is we're putting CO2 into the atmosphere on one hand, but we're destroying rainforests on the other. We're having a horrible amount of habitat destruction in the oceans. The phytoplankton, the oceans are our largest oxygen pumps. They take the CO2 and the phytoplankton to create oxygen. CO2 is not the bad guy so much as it's a matter of destroying the plant life at the same time. We should actually see if we pumped enough CO2 into the atmosphere, if our forests and our oceans were healthy, it would actually improve the climate. But you're not going to see that till, probably too late.
Well, yeah, and there are other gases. There's SO2. I mean, it's not necessarily just the CO2 that is such a problem. It's what happens when you have sunlight hit it and it breaks apart, and you have SO2 and it breaks apart. So it is gases in general from burning and what happens to them in the atmosphere and how that creates warming.
And let's not forget, the internal combustion engines in the United States have been mandated to have a thing called a catalytic converter on them, which was supposed to fix smog. But the problem is it puts sulfuric acid into the atmosphere. So we're almost using, our cars are almost being used to terraform the planet.
They cause they cause changes in the trees. Now, these people who are talking about, geoengineering through the planes that are, spraying whatever it is they're spraying.
Oh, the chemtrails.
The chemtrails. So, literally, if you have exhaust from a plane that's a petrochemical, and that you're going to have SO2 in that. But from the cars, trees are very, very sensitive to SO2. And you get tree sicknesses and funguses and lichen damage from SO2, and that's been going on since the 80s, if not, the 60s. We just didn't know what it was. But it's been documented since the 80s easily what SO2 does to trees. And that cars, in terms of terraforming and changing what happens with trees, are a big deal. So if you're looking at a tree and saying, oh, that tree is sick because of chemtrails, you're totally ignoring this other source right in front of you, and you're not being very scientific. And what is the null hypothesis, Eric? When you're doing science, you want to find you want to.
Oh Lord! It's a statistical test. There's no significant difference between it becomes the gun or the knife. One thing is as bad as another. There's no statistical advantage one way or the other. Okay. It's like you've got a death sentence. Do you want to be stabbed or do you want to be hung? There's just no significance. It's just damned if you do, damned if you don't, no difference.
Right. But there's also some principle where you want to disprove your theory. And what's happening with the chemtrails people in all of this, and especially where climate change is concerned, is they don't want to disprove their theory about chemtrails causing the trees to be sick, so they're not looking at other sources of sickness that are right in front of their face.
Okay, they're skewing the data. They're only putting...
Right.
You're only putting in information that will back what you want it to back up. It's massaging the data. The old saying, when all else fails, manipulate the data. That's sort of the right thing. The same thing.
It's the same thing. You're not looking for something that would disprove, because if you're really doing science, you do want to look for something that will right away disprove your theory and your hypothesis. And
that's one of the things people don't realize is failure in science is every bit as necessary and every bit as important as success. Failure tells you you're barking up the wrong tree. So let's find another tree. Right. So, people think failing an experimental failure is, it reflects badly on the researcher. It's really not. You're adding, we now know, okay, that doesn't work. But we're such a success-driven culture, it's like, they don't think of the failure as adding information that we didn't have before. It's, that's not going to make us a couple $1 billion. Move on to the next.
Right. And so, science is often used to create a debate or to solve a problem for companies and corporations that are using petrochemicals to, say, for example, glycophosphate. Is that a petrochemically derived thing, Eric? Glycophosphate? Isn't it? It's a pesticide.
Phosphates in their own right they're just bad news. I remember back in the 60s where they were phosphate-free dish soaps and stuff like that.
Right.
It's more of a, I'm not sure. It's more of a.
It's like a side. It's like I think
it's an inorganic chemical, so it can't be a petrochemical because it's an inorganic.
Right.
It's where phosphate's one of those phosphate compounds. The phosphate takes the place of where the carbon would be, so it's like the exact opposite of a carbon. Matter of fact, it works almost, the structures and the double bonds and the way the things line up is almost exactly like organic chemistry, where you have carbon backbones. But in the case of inorganic chemistry, phosphate takes the place of that carbon backbone. And you get all these other weird insoluble, that's the main thing. They're insoluble because of what the phosphate and the bonds.
Right. So, if we're talking about, science being used to prove a point, a company that has a lot of money, whether it's a petrochemical company or a company that makes things that a herbicide or a pesticide, can use science to prove or disprove anything it wants, is if it's willing to skew the data. And so when people are talking about chemtrails or climate change or HAARP, there are many things that we have going on that make the issue that they see happen, but they're not looking at those things as they're not calling them causation. And we might have HAARP, and HAARP may be doing something, but there's a saying that scientists use, which is correlation is not causation. Just because there is HAARP and there is something going on with HAARP, just because there is a program of changing weather and flying planes to change weather, it does not actually mean that that program is the causation of the climate change that we are seeing right now. And it would behoove the greater companies, the petrochemical companies and companies that are involved in burning things and putting out SO2, those companies, it's in their, in some sense, if they're distracting everybody with, chemtrails, is looking at chemtrails as the causation versus what they have been doing for decades, or, now a century as the causation, nobody's going to come after them to make them change anything. So for all of us in the conspiracy field, I just want to say, even though I'm a psychic, there are lots of causes for things, but correlation is not causation. And when you're looking at what somebody presents to you as proof that something is happening because of a conspiracy, do some thought research yourself on, well, what else could be causing the trees to die? And what else is in our atmosphere, and what does it come from? And how does that affect human health and human life and plants? And, sulfuric acid and SO2, man, it eats plants. You will have plants die. So covering them up from what's in the atmosphere is a good idea, but it doesn't mean that chemtrails caused what's happening to the plants. And you really need to look at all the causes and then decide which one is more likely, because correlation is actually not causation. And the world is a scary place because all of these things are happening, but it doesn't mean that your government is necessarily trying to kill you next Wednesday at 2 o'clock with a chemtrail. I don't believe that. So that's just my opinion about that. Eric?
I think what you're talking about with the causation, one of the most eloquent ways that was ever done was, or illustrated, was Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Wood burns, wood floats, ducks. Anyhow, that if you want to look up the Monty Python and the Holy Grail, witches and ducks, part of that movie, that's probably the cutest, best way to illustrate what we're trying to talk about, how you can just twist things around to prove whatever you want. But yes, that's the excellent illustration of it. The thing is, we can't. Everything's supposed to be in an equilibrium and in a balance. And the simple truth is, And I hate to say it, but, there's too many of us on the planet, I think. And we become viruses. That part of that in the movie The Matrix, where the agent's saying, y'all are viruses, you're a disease. In a lot of ways, until we, as a culture, as a race, quit trying to conquer everything and start living with it, it's just going to get worse and worse. I mean, the oceans are all, how in the hell did we fish out oceans? You've got these huge ships that go out and they catch everything. And they kill, they're killing things that have no food value, but they have an ecological value. They have a niche that they're supposed to be in, and that niche is disappearing. I just wonder how bad things are going to get before somebody, something's going to have. I know it's going to require famine and, basically the Tower of Destruction happening before anybody wakes up. But, we all try and do our little bit, but maybe it'll cumulatively help in the long run, but I don't know how bad. I mean, even in where I grew up, the climate has changed. Yeah. I grew up in southwestern Michigan. We used to have snowdrifts butt high on a giraffe, and now it's not happening every winter. Having warm winters in Michigan, I mean, that just didn't happen. And they do say if you look at tree rings and you look at Arctic ice cores, it's a cyclical thing. And that's true, because anything that has an equilibrium goes past it. It's like a pendulum. But I think in the case of global climate change, I won't say warming, I'll just say climate change, that we are fueling the equation. We're adding to the swing of the pendulum.
Yeah, and we have to accept that, and it may be that we will all have this spiritual, because things get so dark, because we're not taking responsibility for it or changing what we're doing on a wider scale. And individuals change some things. I'm taking crap because I have a truck. It's a very good 22 mile per gallon V8 engine, but I don't drive to work. So basically my truck, does not contribute a whole lot to the pollution of the world, except for the fact that it exists, and it took a lot of water that was polluted to be made, something like 10,000 gallons per vehicle, I think, was something that I heard way back when. And that I should try to keep it going for as long as possible, because, pollution is, when you buy a new vehicle, it takes a lot to go into it. Anyway, when we stop, but we need to, on a grander scale, take responsibility. Maybe if things get really bad, we'll have a conversion to the more spiritual and less consumeristic, which is what needs to happen, even though it'll be a very dark time, more than 3 days of darkness. All right, well, we're at the end, Eric. We're here at the end.
Really?
This is the end, yes. And I have to make some announcements before we go. Next week, I will be on Cosmic Passport with Paula Hopwood. Paula Hopwood is an intuitive coach, psychic, who is going to be joining us for Psychic Sunday next week with Paisley. She is from Alberta. She is also dodging fires like folks in BC and California and Oregon and Washington and Montana and Idaho right now. And so we're hoping that these fires miss her place so she can come on the show next week. But she will be talking about her near-death experience, her very personal dark time before she had her spiritual understanding and conversion. So next week, Sunday, don't miss it, Paula Hopwood, and then we'll be doing readings with Paisley and Paula for Psychic Sunday. And tomorrow night on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, Dave talks with conspiracy theorist Albert Jack regarding the inconsistencies of the 9/11 investigation starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. I want to thank, even though I can't remember all their names, everybody who helped Spaced Out Radio go. Thank you guys so much. Everybody in the chat rooms for listening. Everybody on the radio programs for, terrestrial radio that's listening. Thank you so much for listening to Cosmic Passport, to Spaced Out Radio. And Eric, do you have anything you want to wish people?
I just want to say good night and peace to all the spacers and S4ians and Cosmic Passporters out there in the chats that make this show what it is. Couldn't do it without you, and we wouldn't really have a need to do it without you. So we thank you and we appreciate you.
And everybody who is hunkering down from the hurricanes, again, be safe, be well. Our prayers are with you, and we hope that everything goes as well as it can, and that you experience miracles you don't even know about, and find that things go back to normal quickly and easily for you. Good night, everybody.